All right, and with me now are Nancy Koehn of the Harvard Business School and Jeffrey Miron, an economist at Harvard University. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy, you were a supporter of this bailout bill. I think everybody thought that this would turn the Dow around at the very least, even though there's some obviously economic instability in the money markets. But 4 days now, it's been down, down, down. Why hasn't there been more inspiration by this signing?
I think a couple of reasons, Emily. One is it took a while to get here. I think the House not voting this bill up on Monday last week was a tremendous blow to investors' sense of leadership and stability in the system. And I think, secondly, this is a necessary but by no means sufficient condition for the Dow to bounce back very quickly. There are a whole host of things going on here that can't really be solved before $1 of the bailout money has been spent, which is where we are. Not $1 has been spent yet. So I think we have investors, banks all around the world, Main Street Americans looking and waiting.
Jeffrey, you've been against this from the beginning. You said actually this is even went as far as to call it a moral hazard. Did you predict something like this might happen as well?
Not necessarily, but I think there are two things happening. One is that there's independent evidence that a recession had probably even started before the turmoil of the last several weeks, and some of that is just working its way through and probably would have been there independent of the bailout. But I think secondly, the bailout generates some uncertainty, some delay. Nobody quite knows what it means, and so the market is still unhappy because it doesn't know what's coming. It doesn't have a clear set of rules to work by right now.
Why not just call this a recession? Because that's what it is by any other. Would that help the situation?
And I don't think that is the crucial thing. I think what the crucial thing is for people to be able to recognize which financial institutions are solvent, which ones are illiquid, and which ones are basically healthy. And the bailout was an attempt to help promote that, but people didn't think enough, in my view, about how long it was going to take for it to set up the agency, for it to decide what to purchase, at what prices to purchase. So there's still a lot of delay and uncertainty in the system, and that's something that Wall Street always hates.
Got this guy, Neil Kashkari, who is a Goldman Sachs guy. He's also Henry Paulson's assistant. He's actually been put in there to, I guess, manage it and figure out who gets the first dollar, who's going to write the checks. I mean, do we have confidence in him?
I think we have to. And I think overall, Bernanke, Paulson, the gang of soldiers in Washington trying to stabilize an unprecedented situation has performed remarkably well. But again, as Jeffrey says, this is a very uncertain moment, and it's a moment that's different from past moments of great instability because there are so many players involved, not only across the country, but literally across the globe. Never before have we been so interdependent and so interlocked.
You know, last June, it was all about the price of oil. That was driving the stock market up and down. It was making everybody crazy. Oil is at $87 a barrel. It was almost double that in June. That doesn't seem to have a wits effect on the market. Now it's all about freeing up the loan money. It's as if the whole market, as they say, even companies like Pfizer and these guys are driven by that.
Again, I think it goes back to uncertainty. Take the example and the difficulty of doing the bailout. Take the example of the person who's been put in charge. On the one hand, he's being criticized because he's too close to Goldman, he's too close to Paulson, but who are you going to choose instead? Somebody who doesn't know anything about this industry?
You want an insider.
You want an insider from many dimensions, but not from other dimensions. The bailout bill has language about not having conflicts of interest, but where do you draw the line? All those things generate uncertainty and delay and mess. And that's going to mean it takes a while to sort it out.
But there's something else here that makes us different than the price of oil spiking. And that is that credit is actually a much more important lubricant than even oil in the world economy. It precedes oil and commodities prices in terms of keeping the machine of capitalism going. And that's what we're talking about, being stuck and unavailable.
Well, I guess that's what I'm getting at. This feels very real as opposed to the price of oil, which always felt like a very, insider, self-generated, fulfilling prophecy and really controlling the market balances, where this is a much more real element.
It is real. It's oxygen. It's the oxygen of the system. And oil is much more like the epidermis, or the skin of the organism. It's just simply much more essential. Credit. And that credit flowing freely, literally, to Main Street in Beijing as well as in Des Moines.
Well, now that this is done, Jeffrey, I mean, I know you weren't for it, but is it going to work? I mean, is
I'm
this going to be the lubricant?
I'm not convinced it's going to work because it's a relatively complicated and subtle scenario under which it works. It's a scenario where the Treasury can figure out which assets held by investment banks and commercial banks are currently illiquid and if they had to be sold now would only fetch bargain basement prices, but are really fundamentally sound. Well, if that were easy to figure out, private forces would be doing that. So that should make us nervous that the government can do it easily or quickly. And it doesn't do the only way they can really recapitalize these banks is by way overpaying, but that has its own negatives. It increases the cost to taxpayer, and it generates a lot of strategic behavior by the investment banks in trying to get rid of the junk and keep the stuff which is ultimately going to be valuable. So it's a hard thing for them to do. I just don't see that it's going to make a big difference. I think it just is going to take time for the market to sort itself out.
The former CEO of Lehman Brothers was testifying before Congress today, Fold. I mean, they were pressing him on could he have known or shouldn't he have known? Did you see any of it? I mean, were his answers comprehensible?
His answers were the answers of someone in the spotlight, right, who rightfully has a lot of have generated a lot of controversy and is answerable to a whole host of people, not the least of which are his shareholders and the larger financial community. I think Lehman Brothers was a very good example of just an enormous vacuum in leadership that has been part of this story for literally years in the credit crisis. Executives, regulators, and some other folks in key positions simply not owning up to the accountability and the responsibility they owed to their people and to the larger community.
He says he tried to save the company. I certainly believed him on that. You know?
Well, presumably he tried to do that, but Wall Street was working in an environment where they were being pushed indirectly to engage in this very risky behavior of extending loans widely because Congress is pushing Fannie and Freddie. Fannie and Freddie are ready there to soak up all this incredibly risky assets. And so why not go along with it as long as you can if there seems to be a moderate chance that it's going to get bailed out somewhere down the line. Now, of course, they had to know, and a lot of people inside government knew as well, that something was going to happen. But you don't know exactly when or how bad. Maybe you hope it happens on somebody else's watch. And so no one is really tempted, any individual is tempted to make sure it all gets fleshed out and gets resolved sooner instead of later. So then when it crashes, it really crashes.
All right. Well, you really think the government was complicit in this? I mean,
I do.
They pushed Fannie and Freddie into
I think they played a huge role.
All right. Nancy Koehn, Jeffrey Miron, thanks for coming tonight.